Okay, once again, this is Gretchen Healey. I am sort of the central Kusini office located here in smoky and hot Denver, Colorado. I had hoped to be joined today by Travel Ethiopia senior guide Ashanafi Salashi from Addis, but he is experiencing a power cut and therefore his Wi-Fi is off. However, hopefully I will be able to guide you at a high level through Axum and Gheralta, our final stop on our tour of the historic north this month in Ethiopia. If you've missed any of our previous installments where we've covered the other destinations such as Addis, Gondar, and Lalibela, you can find those on our YouTube page. Just looking at the map of the historic North Circuit, you can see Axum and Gheralta up at the top here. Axum is about 1,000 kilometers north of Addis, and there's a number of ways to get there, but typically people fly from either Addis or from Lalibela. It was once the capital of the Axumite kingdom, and it stretched from the Nile all the way to Arabia and controlled the Red Sea trade. It reached its peak between 200 and 500 AD and was Ethiopia's most historically, archaeologically, and religiously important town. It's kind of the Rome of the Ethiopian Orthodoxy. It is the site of Ethiopia's earliest Christian church, which dates back to the 4th century, and was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980. And it is also home to the chapel that houses the biblical Ark of the Covenant. This view is from the Yeha Hotel, and it overlooks Axum. You can see some of the sites. On the left, we have St. Mary's Cathedral, and on the right, we have the Stella Field. We'll talk through each of those sites. The history and the culture of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is really all-encompassing for visitors to northern Ethiopia. Lalibela and Gondar, which we covered earlier, rightfully occupy prominent positions in any tour of the country. However, Axum holds a very special significance as a holy site for Ethiopian Christians. As I mentioned, it is the resting place of the original Ark of the Covenant. This is a closer view of that Axumite Stella Field. This is one of Axum's absolute must-see sites. It has dozens of stela of various shapes and sizes. The shattered one in the foreground here was the largest in Axum and dates back to the 3rd century. When it was standing, it would have stood over 33 meters high, and it weighs 500 tons. The largest that's still standing is 23 meters high and was transported from a quarry 4 kilometers away. There's actually no explanation as to how it might have been erected, and there's some posit and legend that it may have had mysterious intervention from the Ark of the Covenant. The second stela that was removed during the second largest stela was removed during the Italian occupation, but has since been returned and re-erected. These stela do not have any religious connotations, but instead are really related to the power and importance of the ruler who built them. Travel Ethiopia guides do a great job of bringing the history to life and going through the reigns of the kings and their history. This site also has some impressive tombs that you can go into, and again, the Travel Ethiopia guides will kind of illuminate those for your guests. This is the St. Mary of Zion Cathedral. It's 20th century construction, as you can see, and was built under the reign of Haile Selassie. Its artwork on the interior is a modernized version of what you've seen in other churches in the historic north. It sits in a compound with other important churches, as well as a museum with an incredible collection of ancient crowns, crosses, and other church relics. The museum itself is actually a bit dark and it's not well laid out, but it's very much worth visiting because the treasures inside are completely amazing. There is a new museum under construction in Axum, and it will eventually house these objects and do a much better job of explaining their significance. But the Travel Ethiopia guides, even in that dark spot, can again take guests through and help them understand the significance of the objects. The new museum is scheduled to open this November, but we suspect it will be sometime in 2021. The building on the right sits in this St. Mary of Zion compound, and it houses the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark conjures up images of mystery from the Knights Templar to Indiana Jones, but for Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, it really holds a sacred space at the center of their faith. Every church in Ethiopia has a replica located in its inner sanctum called the Holy of Holies. But the original Ark is looked after by a handful of monks, only one of whom, who's known as the guardian monk, is allowed to see the Ark itself. And his job, guarding the Ark, is a lifetime appointment. This is the remains of the Queen of Sheba's palace. It was likely Axum's most impressive palace ever, containing more than 50 rooms with an elaborate drainage system. And many of the relics that are seen in the museum in Axum were discovered here. One of my favorite highlights is a bread hearth that's still largely intact, which looks just like modern pizza ovens today. Back to the Ark, several times a month, the monks of St. Mary of Zion bring out a replica for a pre-dawn procession through the streets called Mehelela. We'll have a quick guest appearance from Tad on his experience.
I hope you're enjoying this, what I'm sure is an incredible webinar on Axum hosted by Gretchen and Ashu. I'm going to make a quick guest appearance to talk about an experience that I had in Axum on my last visit several years ago. As I'm sure Gretchen has talked about, the Ark of the Covenant holds a very sacred place at the center of the Ethiopian Orthodox faith. Each church has a replica of the Ark located in the inner sanctum of the church, also called the Holy of Holies. Of course, the actual Ark, it is believed by the faithful, the actual Ark resides inside that humble church next to the St. Mary of Zion Cathedral and is looked after by a handful of monks, only one of whom can actually go and see the Ark itself. But several times a month, and actually on the first 7 days of each month, according to the Ethiopian calendar, the replica of the Ark from the St. Mary of Zion Church is paraded through the streets in a pre-dawn procession called Mehelela. And Axum can correct my pronunciation now. But as you can see on the screen, these faithful pilgrims, all dressed in white robes and carrying these flickering candles and singing traditional hymns, follow the Ark through the streets of Axum. And I was there able to witness it, and it really truly felt like stepping back in time to the 4th century. Were it not for the street lights in Axum, it really could have been as if we had taken a time machine back in time. So the procession starts at about 5 a.m. It's an early morning, but it's absolutely worth that, the extra cups of Ethiopian coffee to get up that early and experience it. It lasts for about an hour and then includes a short special mass just before the sun rises in front of this very famous fig tree that you can see on the right-hand side there. That's the picture of the Ark itself, of the replica of the Ark, and that mass that's conducted next to that fig tree. The next slide is a video which will give you an even more visual and audio sense of what this experience was like. And I hope you enjoy it and enjoy the rest of the presentation today. Thank you.
Okay, so those are some of Axum's highlights. In terms of lodgings, as with many of the towns outside of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, it's very sort of 2.5 to 3 star hotels that are available. The Sabian is our most commonly booked hotel, or was. It's a 3 star, and it's a decent location. There's, the rooms are clean. There's a restaurant on site, and it's fine. Just at the beginning of this year, so I have not yet seen it, the Atranos Hotel and Spa has opened. It has a pool and spa facilities, better amenities, and 2 restaurants, so this is probably a better option for your guests. So moving on to the rock-hewn churches of Tigray and the Gheralta cluster. The Gheralta area, with its really unique chain of mountains, is the home to many rock churches. Some are famous for their architecture, ancient paintings, and manuscripts, while others are known for their magnificent views. Some compare this area to the desert southwest of the US, and I can attest to its similarity. Lonely Planet calls the landscapes of this region almost fairy tale-like, and I really do have to agree. There are around 120 rock-hewn churches in the area, which, beyond being far off the tourist map, are distinguished by age. Many are older than Lalibela's more famous churches, and that are semi-monolithic, meaning that they are only partially separated from the host rock. So Lalibela's main churches are all monolithic, which is carved out of the ground and only attached to the earth at its base. Many of these are carved into existing caves. So it is 190 kilometers from Axum, and it's a 4-hour scenic drive, or you can fly to Mehelela and make the drive from Mehelela. But I highly, highly recommend the drive from Axum, as it is breathtakingly beautiful, and you'll see some photos coming up that will attest to that. As I mentioned, there's about 120 churches that are carved into the sandstone cliffs in this region, and the churches are known for their settings, their atmospheric interiors, and their wealth of old paintings. We did make a stop on my most recent trip at the Gedebeda Market. It was an unscheduled stop, it was impromptu, and really what we came across was a colorful, vibrant market that was teeming with people with colorful spices, beautiful vegetables, and interesting wares for sale, from clothing to weaponry, basically. It was clearly not a tourist attraction. It was a really kind of special glimpse into daily life. And I would just reiterate, I've said this before in other webinars, I think any chance to visit a market in Ethiopia will really leave an impression on visitors. We were certainly welcomed, and we were obviously an unusual sight. So it was a special moment. So this is heading out of Axum towards Gheralta, and these gorgeous mountains are known as Adwa's Teeth, and they were the site of the battle of the first, really the climax battle of the first Italian-Ethiopian War. Ethiopian forces defeated the Italian invading force in 1896, and the victory thwarted Italy's attempt to expand its colonial empire into the Horn of Africa. So by the end of the 19th century, European powers had carved up almost all of Africa, and this victory left Ethiopia as the only African country to enter the 20th century with its independence intact. And the battle, the victory, really secured Ethiopia's sovereignty for another 40 years. As I mentioned, the scenery on this drive is absolutely breathtaking. And it just keeps going. I can't tell you how many times we stopped and just took photographs. Once we did reach the Gheralta area this time, I've visited a number of different churches in the area, but this most recent visit, I was lucky to visit 2 of sort of the most dramatically set churches. I don't know how long it would take to see all of the churches in northern Tigray, so it's really best to work with Travel Ethiopia on what churches are right for your guests. Some of them can be easily reached with a short walk, but almost all of them have some small elevation to get to them. On this most recent FAM, as I said, we chose 2 of the more challenging and, in my mind, rewarding to visit. The climb to Debre Mariam Korkor takes about an hour and has a variety of terrain, including loose rock corridor, as well as some light scrambling up a rock face with footholds. It can all be done in a sturdy pair of shoes, but hikers definitely need to have plenty of water as it's very exposed. The summit where the church stands is at over 8,000 feet. So while it's not as high as visiting, say, the Simeon Mountains, there is real elevation to contend with. Once on top of the mesa there are two different churches to visit, actually. Deborah Miriam Korkor, whose inside is incredibly beautiful with very high ceilings and gorgeous artwork. I'm not sure if I didn't add interior photos to this slide, but you can see the hike itself is also incredibly scenic. Hikers that are up top can also visit Abba Daniel Korkor, which is just a few minutes walk further. It's a very small church, but it's worth the extra few minutes because the views from the other side of the plateau are absolutely breathtaking as well. The other church we visited, and we did both of these in the same day, so it was a pretty physically demanding day, is Abuna Yamata. This would definitely be my top rock-hewn church in Ethiopia for the setting alone. It's a challenging ascent and is not for people, I have to stress, is not for people with a fear of heights. It requires a reasonable degree of fitness. It takes about an hour and climbs about 1,500 feet. And your guests that choose to do this will be walking along this very ledge that you see the priest on right here. And absolutely, the drop-off is as dramatic as it looks. So just to illustrate how challenging this hike can be, much of it's very simple, but when you reach the base of this rock face, shoes and hats also must be removed, keeping in mind that you're headed up to a church, so women will need to have a head covering, and everyone must be wearing pants, no shorts, and shoulders need to be covered. You scramble up this face. You can do it without a rope and harness, but we don't advise that. There are plenty of people to help, and all of us that were there that day ascended without any issue. But again, this would be a no-go for anyone with a fear of heights or any vertigo. And I'll just reiterate this section from the base of this rock, you're barefoot for the rest of the climb. The church itself is quite small, but its 15th century artwork is perfectly preserved and incredibly beautiful. This priest commutes to this church every single day, up and down once a day. And the faithful, the local faithful, make the trek for services every week. You know, when we were in the church, and you'll find priests that are willing to do this when there aren't services. He read to us in Ge'ez, which is sort of an ancient version of Amharic and what the text, the illuminated texts are written in. And honestly, for me, the visit to Abuna Yamata and the climb itself were a huge highlight of this visit to the Gheralta area. Again, there are easier churches for your clients to reach, so definitely work closely with Travel Ethiopia on what's going to work well for your clients. Consider mobility issues. Consider, if they are keen hikers, I would absolutely recommend these two visits. And this whole area does have plenty of walking in it. So for folks that do like to hike and walk, this is a kind of a dream destination. There are a couple of lodging options up in the area. Gheralta Lodge is the first. This is owned and run by an Italian. It's an absolutely gorgeous setting. It's comfortable. It has good food. There are on-site gardens. There are some walks that you can do on-site, and there's a really pretty rock that you can climb up on for sundowners. Here's just a couple of photos of the unique construction. The rooms are basic, but as I said, very comfortable. And this doesn't do it justice, but that view over to that sandstone formation at dawn is one of the prettiest places I think I've ever seen in my life. Another option is Korkor Lodge, and this is the newer of the two. It's an equally beautiful setting. We even had Abyssinian hornbill right outside of our room one day. It's very comparable to Gheralta Lodge. The one drawback I would say is it's not far from a somewhat busy road, so you do get a bit of road noise. Here's a couple of photos of the interior and the views. And then at the very beginning of this year, and I don't have photos yet, Karif 2 opened a property up in this area. They also have a property in Bahir Dar that we use. And I think it was open for a couple of months before the pandemic hit. So Not sure of the status right now, but I expect for your bookings for next year, that will be an option. And especially because both Gheralta Lodge and Korkor are fairly small, it's good to have that third option for when they are not available. So that's just a very quick overview of the Gheralta and Axum areas in the Northern Circuit of Ethiopia. And I'd like to open it up to questions. I'll answer my own question first, and that is what a sort of typical stay would look like in this region. Axum generally, I would say, is something about, it's a one-night stay. You can see the sites in a full day, and then move to the north. Depending on your client's interest level in the churches and how active they want to be, I would think, well, I know you want to do a minimum of 2 nights up in the Gheralta area, but 3 could also be a possibility for folks that want to dive a bit deeper into the churches and or to just spend more time hiking. And I do have a question if I can provide a link for the other deep dive seminars. And yes, we'll absolutely send a follow-up email after this to everyone that attended, and we'll get you the link to all of our past webinars, including the series of Ethiopian webinars. Any other questions? Well, I will also share my contact information with you. I've spent a lot of time in Ethiopia over the last 6 years and would be very happy to answer any questions that come up later, or talk through kind of what a visit through the Northern Circuit would look like, or anything else that might come up. Thank you all so much for attending today, and have a wonderful afternoon or evening wherever you may be.